welcome Jill on, has just made a comment. Jill is a post-16 class teacher at a small independent school for learners with autism. So yes, please Jill, share what you're doing as well, because you may have things that you're doing to prepare your learners for returning, or you've already got learners returning that we can learn from you. So we welcome your feedback. So if I can just start off, excuse me, by introducing myself. I'm Sam Mayhew and I'm the Dean of Faculty at Weston College, and I'm the strategic lead for the SEND Centre for Excellence. I'm going to be talking through some of the presentation, but it's really important that you hear from the specialist staff that are working with the learners with autism and are highly qualified in that area. So alongside myself and Jane Vivian, who's our project manager for the Centre for Excellence, I'd like to introduce Leela Morn and Mel Tacky, who will just give you a little short overview around their role as lead practitioners with autism at the college. So over to you two.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Leela Morn, and yes, I am one of the lead practitioners here at Weston College. Part of the role of a lead practitioner is to coordinate and support a team of specialist autism practitioners that are all graduates in inclusive education. And so our role primarily is to work across the college with students and curriculum areas to make the environment in which students with autism find preferable to study is inclusive and is able for them to access. So I won't witter on because I'm aware that I'll leave Mel much to say. So Mel, if you want to add in.
Yeah, so obviously I'm Mel and I also work with Leela as lead practitioner. We both cover different campuses and I also support our HE practitioner as well. So not only are we supporting the curriculum staff within FE and the students in FE, we're also helping with the HE side of things as well and helping those students who are coming on to university courses to transition into their courses as well.
Thank you, Leela and Mel. And now I'd like to introduce you to Lee, who unfortunately Lee's camera's not working this afternoon, so you can't see Lee. But for many of you that have been to Weston College for our day in the life before we all went into lockdown, Lee's our manager of Weston Bay, and we'll just give you a quick overview of his role.
So yeah, hi, my name's Lee. Like Sam said, I'm the Weston Bay manager. At Weston College, we're very, very lucky to have this residential training facility called Weston Bay, which is a provision that facilitates transition through working with curriculum areas across the college with the lead practitioners and the team of specialist support across the college. Plus we also provide transitions programs in either a full or part-time basis to support learners either in or out of college once they've finished their academic studies.
Thank you, Lee. So that's the team of people that we have here today. Jane, I just didn't know if you wanted to add anything before we start.
Hi, so I'm, as Sam already mentioned, I'm the project manager for the SEND Centre for Excellence, and this is one of the webinars that we're holding as part of our work for the SEND Centre. Obviously, we'll send out the recording from today, but also let you know about future webinars that are coming up. The one that we're running on the 15th of July, we're really excited to have a guest speaker, Nick Elston, who came along to our mental health conference on the 5th of March, and he's very kindly agreed to come and speak to the SEND Centre and our communities of practice around managing anxiety and mental health, in particular response to COVID-19. So we'll send you details, but yeah, as Sam's already said, please drop any comments, any feedback, any suggestions in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. So this afternoon's session, I know that you would have seen this from the booking sheet that you signed up for, but we really wanted to share with you our blended approach that we've developed to ensure that the transition for learners on the autism spectrum is seamless, although we do anticipate that there will be some times that things may be really challenging for learners, but we're trying to anticipate as many things as we can think of for learners so that that transition is seamless, like I said, back into FE and also for HE. We're going to share with you our virtual and digital technologies and how we're using this to engage students. I don't know how many of you have been delivering through virtual learning platforms since the lockdown, and how many of you have been delivering face-to-face. But at Weston College, we very quickly moved across to virtual learning for all learners. We were really worried about how students with SEND would make this transition, but it's been really, really successful. And as we move into the new normal, which people are referring to, we're going to be looking at that blended approach. So students will still access face-to-face contact with staff and teaching staff, but they'll also be engaging through that virtual platform that we've established. We'll talk to you about how we work in partnership. As Leela and Mel and Lee have already stated, working with the curriculum staff is key in ensuring that learners are success, and how we're able to reduce, you know, the anxieties for those learners and also create positivity about returning to college. What we're hearing from the learners at the moment is how they're highly anxious about returning to college. And we just wanted to put into context around the things that we feel learners are experiencing, and explain to you a little bit more about why they may be feeling this high anxiety. So I'm going to pass over to Leela now, who's going to take you through this slide. Sorry for the volume of information in the slide, but we thought it was good to give you as much information as possible that you could take away, that you may want to share with other practitioners within your organisation. So sorry if there's a lot of information there, but Leela will then now be able to put that into context.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Yes, I do apologise about the content there, but like we say, it's something that you can lift and take away with you if you need to. So, you know, I recognise that a lot of you here today may have quite an in-depth understanding around the distinctly different cognition for individuals on the autism spectrum, but anxiety is something that most students with autism experience to a great degree. And the reasons for that primarily are the difficulties that they do have with social relationships, social communication and social interaction, and the fact that they are very much often disadvantaged by the expectation from people who don't understand the distinct differences, and respond and learn and develop in the same way as their neurotypical peers. Also, the weak central coherence and the lack of social imagination, so an inability for them to be able to predict what is going to happen next. So students on the autism spectrum often are very highly anxious because they're not sure what's happening now, and they're not sure what's going to happen next. So a big part of our role as specialist practitioners is to what we call be that cultural interpreter for students on the spectrum. And what that basically means is that we help step in, predict for them, so that we can give them that very step-by-step process around what's going to happen in any given situation, whether that be a social situation or a situation like this, where we are reintroducing students back into college after a time of them not being with us. So we kind of refer to it as sort of being able to culturally interpret as well the neurotypical world and the neurotypical mindset to the person with autism, but also the autism mindset to the neurotypical individual. And that's a very big part of what we do generally within our role. So good transition for learners on the autism spectrum basically means, as Temple Grandin says, no surprises. So where possible, it's really important that everything is staged and predictable, and that we would step in and help them to manage that where possible. We do that by working with them very, very closely outside of their core curriculum. Also, students with autism do have sensory processing difficulties, which does exacerbate their anxiety. And this is particularly prevalent when working within a busy college environment, within classroom activities. So within our individual campuses, we do offer low arousal spaces with sensory resources so that students are able to access these areas and to de-escalate and achieve sensory modulation. And we're always there to be able to support them to do that. So having said all of that, it would seem then that actually students on the autism spectrum actually have enjoyed a certain element of this isolation and distance learning. But it is really important that, you know, we have to take into consideration their significant issues. And we need to look at that before we plan a program of transition to bring them back into college. So consequently, what is needed is a blended learning approach, which addresses both the academic and the autism curriculum. So my colleague Lee will talk a little bit later on about our dual curriculum, so I won't talk too much about that. But it has an emphasis on learning about the social world through real life experience and gives the necessary degree of importance to the social, emotional and communication sensory needs of autistic learners. Whereas it may well be appropriate to remove the distractions and anxiety of a busy classroom setting by a variety of interventions. It needs to be personalised to the student and understand their individual needs, which obviously has distinct benefits. So bearing in mind that an ability to work with other people is an important characteristic for job opportunities, for further learning, and for independence, it's really important that we recognise that actually this level of social isolation that our learners have experienced, which has been at least 4 or 5 months now, does actually have quite a negative and damaging impact upon their well-being, their ability to progress. So I just really wanted to give you that context really about why it's really important that all of our transition programs are distinctly individual to meet the individual needs of each and every one of our learners. And it's done in a very planned and specific way, and it's done really guided by the uniqueness of autism and that autism mindset.
Thank you, Leela. I could see on my screen, Jane, that there was a number of comments that may have been made in the chat. Is there anything that you feel is pertinent that we need to raise at this point, or should we carry on?
I think if we carry on, but just something I've put in the chat there is, kind of the challenges we faced in terms of keeping our learners engaged during lockdown. And I know we're coming on to that in a minute, but we'd love to hear from you in terms of, maybe some of the solutions that you've put in place in your own organisations. Thank you.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier about how our college had set up My Virtual College in a very short space of time. We were really lucky at the college that our forward-thinking corporate team have already had a 2-year digital strategy in place, that we've been working on for the last 2 years. So many of the learners across the organisation were already engaging through Microsoft Teams, the chosen platform that we've decided to work with. And many of you may have other platforms that you're working with, but actually it's been a really good way of keeping in touch with the learners. And what we've done is we lifted our timetable exactly the same days, exactly the same times that we currently deliver to learners. We put it online so that students had those structures and those routines and the familiar staff that they were so used to before lockdown. So what we felt we needed to do next was to really look at the new learners that were coming into college. From talking to parents and carers and young people themselves, we were hearing that there's very little virtual learning that's been taking place in the schools. We've heard more recently about how some of the primary schools are starting to set up Teams meetings with their students so that they can engage with their peers in year 3, 4 and 5 that aren't actually back in school. But as far as the secondary schools in our local area, we aren't seeing that students are prepared to be part of teams and see that that's their usual ways of working. So we've set up a page on our website. It's called We Are Weston. And so all learners can start to access a bridging programme between, well, we started it at the start of June actually, so we're already a month in, so that learners can start to receive the training that they really need in what college will look like when they begin back in September. So we are continuously delivering this year and supporting learners all the way through June, July and August. We're recognising the importance of staff having a break and we've planned that in throughout the 7-week period. But we see that learners, when they have long periods of breaks in usual times, they really struggle in getting back and motivated and engaged, and that anxiety around starting a new college. So we felt that this would be exacerbated even further by already being 4 months out of education. So we have a wide range of activities that have been set up through all the curriculum teams. Pre-enrolment stage has been brought forward to June, as I already mentioned. So learners are already meeting their peers that they'll be studying alongside. They're getting to know their tutors, they're getting their set work, they're doing quizzes and fun activities that gives them the chance to get to know the systems and the processes. And we have been obviously continuing to maintain virtual contact with all our existing learners through individual and group sessions. So this has been really successful, and for learners on the autism spectrum, it enables their specialist staff to go with them to their teams and to provide discreet support, so that they are able to have chats with the students when they're in the sessions. If a student was to use inappropriate communication or was not able to understand what was being asked of them, then that specialist member of staff can be in there and have a private chat with the student to help them to really understand what's happening in that kind of social world within Microsoft Teams. So as you can see there, it's also been important to focus on the DSA applications for learners that are progressing onto HE. We do have a university that's attached to Weston College, and many of the students with autism do choose to stay in the local area and go to university at the college. They're already familiar with the staff and the ways of working and the community. So we're making sure that students are ready, and HE are running programs for students like Effie through the Microsoft Teams. For some of you, you may be using Blackboard and other things as part of your partner university. So we're preparing learners and we're giving them a chance to really try out before they start commencing their academic programs in September. This is really to give learners that opportunity now to develop strategies to overcome some of the barriers, and it's really empowering them so that they do feel prepared and they do know what to expect. And we're hoping through the range of things that we're providing, all in all, we're creating a real positivity about returning to college, and hopefully then reducing some of that associated anxiety. I'll just send
Sorry, before we move on, we've had a question from Helen, which actually just links to one of the bullet points there, to say, how are face-to-face meetings happening with social distancing and how effective have they been?
Okay, so we have started our face-to-face sessions with students, and what we found at the first phase of that, and we may talk about it in a little more detail later on, is social distance walks. And that we're not actually bringing them into a building. We felt that the first stage was to actually meet them on a face-to-face basis without the additional anxiety of being inside. The government and the health and safety information that we're getting is around it's much safer to be outside, as you all know. So we felt that that was the first stage and that we needed to make sure that it was a phased approach. We've started planning now for the next weeks of bringing students physically into buildings, and I think later on we talk a lot about that. So Jill, I'll leave that there if that's okay, and then if you want to ask more questions around it over the next few slides, it should make a little bit more sense. I don't know if Leela or Mel or Lee want to add anything there.
No, I think that's correct. Sorry, we were going to cover that, I think, weren't we, in a future slide, I think, anyway.
Okay, so I'll move on, and we're going to now talk about, this is what we've started to do, but we're really going to talk through in more detail now around the transition programs and how we start to gather that information before we even begin to start the virtual and the face-to-face sessions.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So obviously the gathering of information is a really critical part of the transition programme, and this is something that we start, I would say, not long after we start back in September, if I'm being honest, where we already start to get those applications from students who are looking to join us for the following academic year. We're getting consultations from the local authorities, we're getting queries from parents when we have our open days and open evenings. So all this pre-enrolment information that we start to get prior to the student starting in September, we have been getting for quite some time, and we have already met some of those students through a different variety of ways. For example, going back to that face-to-face element, I met with a student last week on a field. It was a very, very hot day, and we sat in the shade of the field with her mum, socially distanced, but we had a really, really good chat. And it's not something that we've done before. Ordinarily, we've tend to done our face-to-face meetings, either in a school or in a college, and it was really nice to have a much more informal meeting. Actually, it was a better transition, and I think going forward this could be something that we actually start to implement as well. As well as these virtual meetings, we've had the opportunity to also have some face-to-face meetings actually in some schools as well. We've had one school in particular that's locally has had a few review meetings in a big conference room. So we've all had our own table in a conference room, very much socially distanced, and that's been a great opportunity to kind of meet the parents and meet the students and the SENCOs and the local authority all together as those meetings, as well as having some of our virtual meetings that we've had via Teams and Zoom as well. We have had that opportunity to kind of really mix things up this year and think outside of our normal parameters, I think. And we have been able to gather a lot of information and a lot of data from that. We're still in touch with a lot of schools. We're still meeting with SENCOs on the phone and via Teams and Zoom and what have you. And we're still getting all that information that we would ordinarily be getting anyway. We are still trying to be part of the interview process as well. So when a student applies to our college, they disclose whether they have any additional learning support needs. So we know from the outset whether a student might need support, so that we can make contact with the parent or with the student before they even have an interview. We know from the offset whether they need any support. And if we can, we have attended virtual interviews and also before lockdown happened, face-to-face interviews, so that we were very much a part of that information gathering process. The good thing about that has been that at the time of being able to be part of the interview and to be able to kind of assess what those students' needs are, we can help the curriculum look to see whether that particular program of study that they've applied for is the correct program of study that's appropriate for them. And I think that we've really found that on some occasions, it might be that they need a longer transition period, so we can put together a very bespoke, individualised programme of support and maybe have a transition year, or look to have them to do a transition programme and maybe throughout the year infill into mainstream courses, so that they're not feeling too overwhelmed, particularly with students who may have struggled in mainstream education. Just last week, I met with a student who had she had applied for a course, and during the interview it became very apparent that she had actually been a school refuser for the last few years and had really struggled with mainstream education. So immediately we were able to speak to Weston Bay and kind of they spoke to her and her mum, and it's become apparent that actually it's a more appropriate programme of study for her. So we could really see from the outset what the correct course was, and she's really happy with that now that she's got much more transitional approach to the start of college, rather than going straight into a mainstream course where she would really struggle with that. We also work alongside the local authorities and the transition coordinators there from the local authorities. We're working with social workers quite a lot. Very much getting all the information from those other outside agencies and really trying to establish what kind of programme we need to be putting together for our learners. I think I've covered everything under there. I don't know whether anybody else wants to add any element there, but I think I've covered everything under that area.
Okay, thanks, Mal. So once we've gathered all this information, we're now beginning to engage learners through this virtual platform. And I think it's Leela that's doing this slide. Am I correct?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot I put myself on mute. I do apologise. Might have been better if I'd stayed on mute. Yeah, so yeah, I won't reiterate everything that's already been said, but obviously, you know, the college moved incredibly quickly to distance learning virtual form, and in terms of our students with autism, and again, you know, with that real focus on anxiety, the steps that we needed to take with our students was to start with, you know, really to help them to understand again those sort of virtual learning rules and the etiquette around learning distantly, and also sort of through the virtual platform. So for example, it's not, you know, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in terms of putting messages on Teams and things like that. And again, that really just goes back to what I spoke about on that first slide around sort of being able to step in really and culturally interpret and be able to support students to produce. Sam did also mention earlier about specialist practitioners being able to access those online sessions, which we are able to do in a very discreet manner. And also we're able to then unpick some of those difficulties that may have occurred with online sort of tutorials afterwards. And we have found that actually, you know, learners have consistently wanted to still engage with us, even more so, to be fair, through the virtual platform than face to face. Also, what we've saying my connection is unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, still hear you, Leela.
Okay, sorry, it just said unstable. One of the other things that we've needed to ascertain, as well as being able to assess whether learners are actually confident and able to use the virtual platform, is whether or not they actually have any IT equipment within their home. So of course we have lots of students from different socio-economic backgrounds, and not all students do have access to the appropriate technologies that they need in order to be able to access what we are as a college. So part of what we've done then is being able to take them through just a very brief questionnaire with contact with parents as well. And if they haven't had access to the necessary means, then we've been able to provide that to learners. And to be fair, that's been quite vast as well. So one example, aside from just this sort of standard kind of laptops and things like that, I have a student that studies photography, but due to his rigid mindset and his ability to be flexible around that, he's needed to use very specific camera equipment, which is normally held in our campuses, you know, under lock and key at the college. And he wasn't able to transfer those skills to using a different camera. Again, the autism mindset just wouldn't allow for that. So what we did was we actually sought and purchased him this very specific camera that he needed to remove that barrier, because without it he just wasn't able to continue with his projects and could have resulted in him not getting the grades. So just by looking at those, you know, those reasonable adjustments there about how can we support you to still be able to continue and be successful on the course. So that's just one example. It's not necessarily just the sort of standard laptops and things. It's whatever they need really to be able to continue to be successful. So the training in the virtual technology teams, not all students, especially those that are coming in, are able to use Teams. So it's been really important that we've been able to guide those learners to be able to access those Teams and to train them in how to do that. And again, as I will always reiterate throughout this, it is very individualized. So some students aren't able to use Teams, but they also don't like to communicate via the telephone either. And therefore, you know, it can be quite challenging to sort of find, okay, how are we going to do this? But like Mel said earlier, we really have sort of stretched in terms of thinking outside of the box. The detective work is never done. And we were able to contact parents and social workers, that the people that, you know, this is where that real partnership comes in. You know, the parents are very much our partners in this, and being able to maybe talk to them over the phone and teach them how to use Teams, and then they've been able to do that with their son or daughter. So it's, you know, it's really been about what works for you, and there really isn't many limits to what we will be able to sort of do in order to make sure that you're not disadvantaged in any way by what's happening in this current state of play with the COVID landscape. We also
just to interrupt there, Leela, I think we've even been doing things like online drafts, Uno, chess, and what have you as well, just to try and engage some of these students, haven't we, virtually, and what have you, things that we never knew were even possible.
Yeah, you'd be amazed. I've become very, very, very good at online ships.
Leela,
yes.
We've got a question actually, just in terms of one of your points that you've just made at the beginning of this slide here from Sandra. Is there any funding available for IT equipment? And obviously a lot of what you're covering here relies on IT equipment for learners.
To be honest with you, that's probably a question that Sam would be best placed to answer in terms of the funding. But
Yes.
I believe that there have. Sorry, Sam, do you want to chip in on this one?
We know that the government has given some additional funding for IT equipment, but we also know that for that, many students haven't received their laptops yet. So our college looked at the bursary and did it through that process. We are looking at making that accessible for learners from September. Bursary application forms go in on the 1st of August. So we've been making parents aware that once they've done the IT survey, we're then going back to the parents and making sure that we can support them in applying for that bursary so that we can get that equipment, so that learners have that at home ready for the start of term. We're hoping by the end of August we'll be able to get that equipment. We were managing to get laptops delivered to students within a couple of days. I don't know how the college has gone about that, if I'm totally honest, which fund they've used, but I'm sure that that's something we can find out from our college registrar if people want additional information.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so just getting back really to the sort of training in virtual technology and teams, we also do have step-by-step guides and videos that are live on the college website, and then the one-to-one mentoring from specialist practitioners, which I alluded to earlier, and also Mel talked about, you know, in the different ways in which we can coerce and encourage students to be able to engage with us online in whatever means that may be, especially in terms of games and things like that. But also, like I said, really bringing the partners in as well, because you know, they know their son and daughter best, and we really do rely on that strong partnership to be able to glean from them really what we can do to support them. So the bridging programs with curriculum is very much about so curriculum areas have put together sort of programs throughout the summer. Sam spoke about it earlier, throughout June, July and August, and it's about really offering students that are coming into the college little tasters, if you like, of the type of work that they're going to be expected to do once they join with us in September, little summer projects that they can start to work on, so that, you know, we're not allowing that disengagement to continue, and we come in and really support with that as well, again in all the ways that I've discussed. So it's also really good for us to be able to assess during that summertime as well some of the difficulties that our learners may be having accessing that virtual experience, so that we can get in early and be able to unpick those difficulties and remove those barriers ready in time for them to start in September. So all the time we're just thinking around ways in which our learners are not disadvantaged in any way. Our one-to-one specialist support and our dual curriculum. So again, our one-to-one specialist support is continued virtually, and we've also done face-to-face as well in a socially distanced appropriate way, obviously within the parameters of government guidelines, and have met out in parks, and we have met students as well within their schools. And that's been a very, very good way to transition as well, because whereas I might be somebody new, the school environment is not new, and then it's been that kind of real phased approach between then inviting them into a different environment, but then I'm not different because they've managed to build that relationship with me. So again, you know, just sort of tailoring the support to meet those individual needs in what that student may require in order for that transition to be successful. The dual curriculum that we offer, and again, I don't want to talk too much because I know that Lee is going to discuss this in more depth, but it is very much around the fact that our students are enrolled within a curriculum, core curriculum program, and alongside that core curriculum program, we work with them on what we call their Autism curriculum, and that's about sort of looking at the specific social communication and emotional difficulties that our learners have, and being able to sort of make sure that those parts of that student are being worked through as well, so that they can develop those strategies that they need to be able to go on and be successful, whether it be further education or progress into employment. And it's a very collaborative approach. It's about working together to support them to find those strategies that work. But I'll leave that bit there because I'm aware that we'll talk about that again. So the Parent and Carer Forum is available. We do also individually contact parents all the time and build those significant relationships with them as well as the student. But also we have an autism's transition page that's been developed where parents are able to post questions, and somebody through the live chat as well, somebody will be able to answer any of their queries. And also we have presented context as well for parents so that both students and parents can see what support we offer. How are we going to help your son and daughter? How are we going to help you during your time at college, and what is that going to look like? So the question and answer sessions with parents, again, you know, I think Lee is well, so we invite, and that will be happening again. So again, it's just, you know, meeting the parents and building those relationships. Relationship really is key. And we have the college film as well. So what college like, which Sam spoke about earlier, and that's on the website. So if anybody would like the link for that, I'm sure that we can post that on here or send it to you directly, just so that you can have a look and see. And that was delivered by our principal, Dr. Paul. He was very keen on being able to do this video so that all students coming in, but this is particularly prevalent for our learners as they come into the college campuses. What can you expect?
Just to let you know, Leela, we've actually put the link to that in the chat function earlier on. It's the planning a phased and safe return to campus, so you can view that video via that link.
Thank you, Jane. Ahead of the game.
Lee, are you over to you, Lee?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, as part of the college's approach to the transitions, we do offer some social activities as part of our dual curriculum here to develop their social communication skills. So in order to ensure that learners on the autism spectrum have ongoing access to social events, we have this activity calendar, which we will continue to run all throughout the summer. So at the moment, this is delivered virtually to the learners. However, we are planning for that face-to-face delivery from mid-August as part of the phased return. The social activity calendar offers learners the chance to maintain their social interaction skills, as well as develop friendships, and perhaps even learn a few new skills. We run activities twice each day, and learners can choose to kind of book in with these activities with the members of staff that deliver the activities directly, or if they need some support with this, they can work with their specialist support or their personal tutor to book onto those activities. The activities are developed using the learner voice, and they can range from anything really, from film clubs where learners can discuss their likes and interests around these quite fun topics, through to developing their fitness, their health and well-being, or even to learning a few new independent skills with some cook-alongs. And yeah, mentioned earlier was the video that Dr. Paul has produced to support all the students back into college, but also to complement that, the college have offered these 3D virtual tours, which can be found on the college's website or through individuals' curriculum areas Teams pages. These tours are available for all campuses and can offer learners the opportunity to really explore the environments that they will be studying in or returning to. And this is especially good for those learners on the autism spectrum, as it takes away some of the anxiety that can be that can be there for either going into new places, and it can make that experience of transition into college a bit more predictable for them. The tours do contain a lot of information through links, which can be found on the tabs that are dotted around the virtual buildings. And they're there predominantly to support the learners into their new environments and to build up their confidence before they start college. So yeah, here we've got a few examples of that. Just on the left are some various classrooms, one from Weston Bay campus, one classroom just there on the left as well from our sensory learning base. And then we've got a few on the right. One of them is a bedroom at our residential training facility. And we also have the canteen. So a lot of our learners that might be in foundation learning, that would be the canteen that they would be using for their lunch break. So it's quite good that they can have a good look around and explore that.
I think more than ever, the staff are really using these 3D tours, and unfortunately they don't show the stickers and the different signage and the sanitizers and all the additional health and safety measures that the college has taken place. So I think, as Lee mentioned earlier, this is where the video that Dr. Paul's created of him walking through the college and showing all the different things, showing the temperature gun that's pointed at a student's forehead when they get straight into the building, and that's done by an unfamiliar staff member. And I think that's really worrying for a number of staff, students, but also staff, about that invasion of privacy and who's going to do that and what's happening. It feels something that we've never had to do before. So I think that hopefully through using these 3D tours, we're really breaking down some of the barriers. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see very well, but there's different coloured dots. So if a parent was wanting to find information, they would click on a certain colour, and that would be that parental information. And then there is also some yellow dots that relate to students, and they're kind of for students, from students. And we found that that's really useful, because we can say so many things to a student, but actually hearing it from another student and using peers to support other students has been really successful as well. So we'll just move on. And Jane, is there any questions that you want us to answer now?
No, there's nothing new in terms of questions. A couple of people are asking about the links. I've popped them in the chat, but if you have any problems, if you just email me, I can send out, well, actually, what we will do is we'll send out the links to all of the interactive tours and the safe return to campus from the Centre for Excellence website email address after this webinar, just to make sure that everyone can access them.
Yeah, and I think that if we could give anybody any advice or any tips, I think that since we've had these tours for 2 years now, and they've been so successful, and it's been brilliant to utilise. And if anybody, I know that financial worries that colleges are all under, but whilst your colleges are quite empty or your schools are quite empty, this would be a great chance for you to get that scanning done, because it does take a good hour and a half for the whole areas, especially large areas like the college bistros, to be scanned when you can't have anybody in the building. So if anybody wants any details of how we got our scans or which company we use, there's lots of companies out there, but if you want to, the company we used had a SEND background. They understood the needs of learners with SEND, and they really helped us with all the tags in all the different colours that you can see. So we'd be happy to recommend that company onto you if anybody was interested. Moving on to the next slide. I think this is me, actually.
I thought it was me.
Oh, you carry on, Lee. It is you.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly as Sam was saying, a lot of those tours those tours don't have the adaptations that have been made to the buildings because of COVID. So to further support the learners transition, we do have all of these campus specific resources which are displayed around the college, but can also be provided in advance to support learners in being able to predict what the college is going to either look like, or what the new procedures of either moving around college or even gaining access to the building might be like. So we can provide those to the learners, and we know that COVID may have had an impact on some of the learners, and many of them may be feeling quite affected by this or might have specific anxieties. So I think it's our duty to try and relieve some of those anxieties and provide assurance like where we can. For some learners with additional learning difficulties, this might be things like social stories, which can be created visually with their specialist practitioners. For others, these could be through the vlogs, which can be, which have been created and published on the college website by learners within those specific curriculum areas. So hearing it from their peers, as Sam said. and they've been published on the college website and on its social media. They keep releasing them daily, so they're there to support that, to share their own learning experiences and experiences of what kind of returning to college will look like and be like as well. That's me.
Okay, I think this is me, isn't it? As we said earlier, you know, it's become quite apparent that a lot of our learners who are on the autism spectrum and potential students who are coming in do have a level of anxiety about coming back to a college environment. In addition to the fact that college is a new place, there is a fact that this is also a new way of living, I guess, as well, you know, and studying and learning in comparison to having, you know, 3 months out of the loop for a while. So there are lots of things that we're having to kind of help our learners get their head around in this transition. So all of our learners have been invited to the upcoming transition days that we've got coming up now that the campuses are starting to open and what have you. But you know, understandably, these transitions, I just want to reiterate that they are done on an individualised basis. Some learners still have their anxiety that's quite high, and so the thought of kind of meeting in a group setting, you know, and we can only obviously do those in certain numbers at the beginning anyway, is still a little bit overwhelming. So we are very much looking at these transition days and these face-to-face transition days being very much on an individualised basis. And we have as practitioners already made contact with the learners that we have got coming in, so that we can already get an idea of those learners that do want to do things on an individualised basis, and those that are a bit happier to come on in and meet the practitioners and other peers, you know, 2 or 3 at a time if we can. So this is just an example here of our plan that we have for transition days. It looks just like a series of activities there when you look through them, but understandably there's more to these plans. You know, it's about trying to, again, going back to getting the information on our learners and looking at their needs. We can get an idea from these transition days of how their social interaction skills are. We can get an idea of even how their executive functioning is and their planning, and how much support they need in writing out basic information, where the independent skills are in terms of students being able to get to college, how their independence is in being able to navigate around different campuses and trying to remember where they are. And this is the kind of thing that very much the transition day is about. It's not just a case of activities. You know, that there's very much an ulterior motive really in some ways for us as practitioners to really get to know our learners and really establish what those needs are prior to them coming, so that we can really make sure that we're able to comprehensively produce profiles on our learners to share with the curriculum areas prior to starting, and to really make those assessments based on our students' needs and help them formulate their individualised programmes and look at their outcomes of what we can help them work through when they, you know, when they actually start college with us, and look at even before they start college, how we help them and how we support parents with travel training. I think if anything this year, this is the one thing that we have found a little bit more of a challenge, if I'm being honest, has been perhaps the travel training element. Under normal circumstances, we would be spending the summertime helping them get on the bus and to really establish what those travel training needs are and to help them with that. Whilst we can establish those needs now, it's very much down to supporting the parents and working in partnership with them really at the moment to help with that, obviously because of the constraints that we've got on public transport and things like that. So I think if anything, that this year has been our biggest hurdle in trying to work with our learners. But just to give you a little bit of an idea as to what those face-to-face transition days are looking like, we just thought we'd just share this with you.
Okay, thank you, Mel. As everybody's been talking about right the way through the presentation so far, it's been about the importance of partnership. And I just wanted to give you an update on some of the things that we've been doing around our partnership work to ensure learners have those seamless transitions. One of the things, and like many of you will be doing, is looking at high needs learners and learners with EHCPs where they haven't been able to achieve those outcomes and they're not ready to progress on to the next stage. many learners that were progressing into apprenticeships, into supported internships, haven't been able to secure that employment and have the job coaches with them during the summer term to prepare them for that paid employment once they finish college at this time. So we've worked really closely with the local authority in producing lists of learners that need a college extension. They need to return to us for an additional year or for additional 3 months or an additional 6 months. They're just not ready to be out in the big wide world. And also in many, as you are all aware, many organisations and shops and restaurants and cafes and hotels, and that's in Weston-super-Mare, sunny Weston-super-Mare on the beach. That is where a lot of students progress into work in our area. That's the need in our community, and obviously all of those a lot of those provisions are still closed. So we're looking at bringing them back for an extension, and we're working with the local authority to agree that that funding remains for another year. We've extended our induction period. Those of you are probably all aware of the 42-day rule that we all work against at October half term, and making sure with the first ILR return that learners are on the right courses. And so we've extended our induction this year to a 6 weeks period, and we recognise that students may start really well in the first month, but then they may need to transfer or have that programme individualised further and extend their programme. We're seeing for students moving from level 1 to level 2, they may need an extension on their level 2, and they may need to do that over 2 years. So we can really focus on the resilience and the team and transition them back into an organisation before they can really focus on that academic study. We will see that in January we will have an intake of learners who may have been coming from the special schools or some out-of-county specialist provision, and it may be that they can't transfer into our organisation until January. It may be that they need to return to the old organisation or their educational organisation that they were currently in for an additional 3 months, and then we can start the transition after October to bring them back into their local area. So we do anticipate that there'll be lots of transfers between courses, in that extended induction period of 42 days, but also in January, looking at students who are now ready to progress into other areas of the college that they just needed that 3 months back in a highly supported area. We know that there are going to be increased levels of support. For those of you that are in the midst of timetables for September and looking at bubbles and pods and learning groups and staff teaching across multiple campuses and having a cross-college role, it's really, really hard and mind-boggling on how we're going to do this. But we do know that with the reduced class sizes, that we will then need increased levels of support for those learners if we're splitting groups of 12 learners into groups of 6. Although we've talked about the blended model and that students will be returning to a 50% on-site provision and a 50% virtual provision, we know for many learners with SEND, including those students with autism, that actually that won't be the case, and they will be returning to us on a full-time basis. So we'll be looking at how we can make adaptations to their timetables, using the libraries and the resource bases for learners to do that virtual learning, but maybe within the college environment, they may need additional tutorials with their tutors. So it's really now about being as efficient as we can with our additional learning support funding, whether that's the high needs funding or the AEB funding, to really ensure that we're able to provide the support that these learners are going to need. And I think that as a college, we're recognising the volume of staff training and development that our teams are going to need and the support that the staff are going to need in returning to college. And as we talk about the anxiety around students, we also are hearing so much anxiety around the staff. And it's planning for that, and it's upskilling and making sure that students, that staff feel ready and they know what they're doing. And the learning technology teams have been incredible in supporting our staff and really helping them with all the blips that go on when we're trying to create really exciting and innovative ideas to deliver to the students. It's been those learning technologies that have enabled us to do that, and they're providing workshops right through the summer, drop-in sessions, question and answer sessions. And I think that as a college, our principal has been very supportive of saying, we know you don't know it all, and we'll do as much as we can to upskill you during the summer period. So I'll just move on to the my last slide actually, and then I'll come back to question and answers. There is so many resources and training available on the ETF website. So I think Jane will be able to put in the chat a link. I understand from quickly reading some of the questions that are coming through the chat that you're not all accessing all of the links that Jane's sending, but we'll make sure we've made a note, and when we send out a copy of the recording and the presentation, you'll have all the information you need. So please keep checking out on the ETF website because there's so much there. But also we are running a level 2 autism award in understanding autism. So any of your colleagues or practitioners that you're working alongside, this course can be accessed completely virtually. And at the moment it is fully funded. And we do have some space on the course in July and August. So if anybody's interested in wanting to really learn more about autism, or you want to send it out to the support staff, then please do so. And as Jane said, if you can email us at the email address below, then we can quite happily send you the details. The other thing I just wanted to say is mental health first aid qualification. For those of you that have listened in to our hot topic that we did 2 weeks ago around mental health and well-being of young people for staff and students, it's so popular and it's such an incredible qualification that our staff really feel empowered and upskilled around understanding not only their own mental health, but also the students that they work with. Hot off the press this afternoon, I've been told that we have 5 spaces on the course starting in July. We don't normally offer this out to externals, but we do have 5 spaces. It is £275 and it can be that the next course in July and August is being run completely virtually. So if you are interested, then please, like I said, we've got 5 spaces. If we were able to get another cohort of 16, then please email us and we'll be able to put that on for you, because we really recognise how important that's been in our own organisation, and it may be able to support you. So as Jane mentioned earlier, the mental health and well-being, we've been inundated with questions, and we've put on another talk around anxiety. And so we have, as Jane said earlier, Nick Elston. I have spelt his name wrong, so I do apologise to Nick, but he's coming on the 15th of July in 2 weeks' time to talk about anxiety. And we do also have a webinar with Derby College and City College Norwich next Tuesday. And that's really around what do you as a sector want in the next phase of our Centres for Excellence from September to March. We're hoping that you can give us some feedback on the kinds of things that are happening within your organisation and across the sector that you feel that as Centres for Excellence, we need to make sure that we support you with. As I said at the beginning, this is just our kind of views and opinions and what we've done and how we've modelled our approach on seamless transitions for learners with autism. Sorry, but we'd really welcome any feedback now from you, or any extra tips, or any points that you want to make. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough all of a sudden. Jane, is there anything there that you want to?
No, there's no additional questions at the moment, but a few people have just commented on. So Heidi recently did the autism course and said that she found that very helpful. I've put a link in the chat and some really lovely feedback. So thank you, everyone. Please, if there's any further questions, let us know. If not, as I said, apologies for those of you who haven't been able to access the links. We will make sure that they go out to you after this webinar.
Yeah, we've got the rest of the day. We're free for another half an hour, although I know that we've got lots that we need to get on with, but we'll just leave it for a couple of minutes running. Thank you everybody for joining this afternoon. We hope that we've given you some useful tips and advice, that things you may take back into your own college. This is a communities of practice, and like I said, it's about sharing. If you've got questions on an individual basis that you'd like to discuss, then our autism team, Leela, Mel, and Lee would be more than happy to arrange a telephone conversation or a Skype meeting or a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. Unfortunately, we can't arrange those face-to-face visits, but we're more than happy to support across the sector if it helps you in any way. So I know when we set up, we can also you can also get in touch with these guys. So Jane, are we logging off, Jane, do we think?
Yes, I think so. A lot of people are just putting feedback and thank you in the chat and then logging off. Just one question Emma's asked about how do they book onto the Talking Anxiety webinar. That will be sent out to you after today. We just need to get it onto the ETF website as an event, and then we'll send you a link so that you can register to attend that. So that'll come out following this webinar.
I think that for those of you that are still here, if anybody's got any feedback around logging on to and accessing these webinars through the ETF, we're hoping, when we did the session 2 weeks ago, we had a few blips with the links being sent out. But if you've got any concerns about the process, then could you let us know? Because obviously as a college, we don't access it in the same way that you do. So any feedback around that process and how we can make it easier for you would be really useful. So, and thank you for your lovely comments. We do appreciate that. And as we've said, we hope that you'll take it back, and good luck over the next couple of weeks, and hope that you've all got your holidays at home booked in, because we know that, you know, we're all feeling, you know, from the sector, feeling quite exhausted at the moment. So thank you. We'll log off now because nothing else seems to be coming through. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the Nick Elston talk. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.